Welcome back to Dolly Crafter. A little while back, I was invited to do a retro anime collab with some pretty amazing and awesome artists here on YouTube. Joining me today are Dolly Mixtures, Telly Dollies, The Dolly Geek, Jackie O, The Hatter Dolls, and Steffu Doll. I had so much fun with this collab, and I think everyone's doll turned out so amazing. I'll be providing their links below. Now, for retro anime, I had to dig really deep in my memory box, but you saw the thumbnail and know that I chose... Dun, 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 dun. That's right, I chose Chibiusa. Chibiusa for me was an easy selection. Everything from her bouncy pink hair to her bubbly yet spunky attitude made this character a perfect choice for this collaboration. Growing up, I remember admiring the fact that she wasn't minus her flaws. And even though she messed up quite a bit, this character never gave up. Chibiusa always brought her best foot forward to protect her loved ones and her friends, which is something that I still admire and I think everyone can learn from. Now, before we proceed with this video, I want to address the obvious. If you saw the other videos before this one, you'll know that I've been going through a technical nightmare! I've tried everything I could possibly think of, including buying a new computer just to finish this project. I hope that the problems that I've been having are actually solved, so I never have to say these words to you again. Fingers crossed. And my toes. Okay. Now for the hard part. That's right. Picking the base was the hardest part for me. This is my first time working solely off of somebody else's character design, and it's a lot harder than I thought. Usually I make up my own characters, so finding the perfect base for somebody else's design was a challenge. Ultimately, I decided between these Hair-Dorable dolls and this Disney Animator doll. The Disney Animator doll, though, these legs, And upon closer inspection, she had molded on eyelids that I would either have to Dremel or sand down, and I did not want to do that. So, though she's cute, I decided to go with a Hair-Dorables doll. This doll had similar head proportions, except she had a smooth finish on her face. But this little body, I refuse to make clothes for, so I headed back to the stock box to find a doll with better proportions for both sewing and the character design that I'm going for today. I'm trying to recreate Chibiusa's first transformation where she comes back as a trainee, and this Boxy Girls doll has the perfect proportions in my opinion. The complexion was really close, so I'm gonna go ahead and go with these. Now, don't get startled because I lost my electric razor, so I had to take these huge fabric scissors and avoid cutting her poor little ears off to remove the hair, but we got it done. After that, it was all the normal steps like ripping her head off and trying to remove her hair, except this tiny little neck hole required something a lot smaller, and the only thing I could find were these cuticle cutters. It's kind of gross, but look at the result! Oh, it's like an egg with ears. I cannot. Look how... Oh, it's perfect. Okay, seriously, out of all of the hybrids I've ever made, I think that this one is the cutest. I cannot with this doll. Oh, should I make like a whole army? I want to make a whole army. Ooh. Man, too bad this doll doesn't work the other way around. It's just not as cute. I mean... Okay, I'm sorry. Moving on. Let's find out if this doll retains its cuteness after we take off the factory paint. I think I'm gonna want to put some eyes back on her face. Yeah. But before we do that, I'm actually gonna change the skin tone on her face just a little bit. Although the sculpt of the doll matched Chibiusa's character perfectly, the skin tone was just like a hair off and it bothered my eyes. So in my experience, it's way easier to change the color of a head than the body itself. If you customize dolls, you know the struggle of trying to get pigment to stick to joints. So whenever I have the opportunity to change the color of the head instead, I go for it. Now for my mistake, because there's always at least one. Because we're human beings, yeah. Okay, no, seriously, I forgot to do something very simple, and that is lay down a layer of Mr. Super Clear. That's important because pastels and watercolor pencils need something to stick to. So, just when I thought things were going okay, I started to realize the doll was looking a little dirty. She had developed all these like weird dark spots on her joints. I can only assume this is because I didn't lay down that initial layer of Mr. Super Clear. I was doing a lot of handling with the doll during the blushing and drawing on the eyes, but again, this is just an assumption. So instead of stripping the doll with acetone and starting all over again, I figured I would start with something more familiar and use acrylic paint. I just start grabbing colors that I thought would mix well to create Chibiusa's skin tone. This is pretty much guesswork at this point, so once I have the color selected, I add tiny amounts of each color and blend them slowly until I get something that looks sort of like Chibiusa, but this girl looks just like Casper the Friendly Ghost. My god. Honestly, this is due partially to my new lighting setup, but even in different lighting, I mean, it's not terrible. This could easily be fixed with some blushing, but in my opinion, the color was a little unnatural. We're not gonna fixate on this. Like I said, not a big deal. We're gonna move right along. I didn't completely cover her eyes with the paint, so I just went ahead with the watercolor pencils again to trace the shape that I had already drawn on to make it easier on myself. And I'm not gonna lie, once I started getting into the actual details of the eyes, such as adding the black lines, enhancing the colors, I began to get a real appreciation for anime eyes itself. I've always loved anime and I think it's such a unique style on its own, but I've never drawn anime in my life, so this was really cool. My favorite part, honestly, was the amount of space I had to work with when drawing these eyes onto this doll. It was, it was just having like a giant playground to just add details, line work, gradients. It was just fun. It was fun to do. The giant eye shines, just everything. Everything was great. And as you're seeing her right now in this video, I think this doll is the cutest freaking thing ever. Now for the wefts. I know we're kind of jumping into like a fast forwarded clip, but this honestly is just the most important bits in my opinion. This cardstock I made a long time ago and it's basically just pre-measured so that when I wrap the yarn around it, I get even strands once it's cut. My goal during this process is just to load up this cardstock with as much yarn as possible because I always like having more than I need rather less than I need because it always sucks to go back and have to do this again. Once I remove the yarn from the cardstock, I tie it to this metal thing. It's a circular metal thing that came with my oven. I'm assuming you put like hot pans on it, but when I started getting into doll making, I just thought it would be perfect for making wefts instead. So one by one, I just add the strands into the empty slots until all of the strands are tied into the spaces. This particular yarn, it's wavy, but it also has like a white piece of thread or yarn in the middle of it. I don't really know what the purpose of this is. I'm pretty sure it's like a certain type of yarn. I'm just not familiar with it. But once I start brushing it out with the dog brush and flat iron it so you can see it here, it's like white highlights and Chibiusa doesn't have white highlights. So I basically took tweezers and took the threads out of the wefts before I glued it onto my plastic surface. After Elmer's glue wall sits maybe like overnight, some people wait 24 hours, but after it sits for a decent amount of time, you can easily remove the wefts. Now for her voluminous pigtails. So Chibiusa has these giant, fluffy, gorgeous pigtails, and I didn't think I could achieve that volume with just using wefts, so I'm going to create an armature made of 2 wires and stick them into either side of her head so that I can basically create the fluffiest pigtails in the world. Anime has such like a dramatic but amazing style and I wanted to do the best I possibly could. So after I shape and form the wire, I'm going to use this leftover yarn from dog brushing to serve as a filler. I'm going to do this by taking a chunk and wrapping it around the wire with hot glue. Once both wires are covered, I bend the pigtails into shape. Meanwhile, I'm also going to go ahead and add her beautiful bangs and side curls to create that classic Chibiusa look. You go, girlfriend. Go, Chibiusa, you so cute, yeah. After I add the curls, I simply just glue the wefts in a circular motion around that filler pigtail that we made until both of her pigtails are completely covered in the wefts. Now, what kind of bun head would she be without any buns? Well, hair buns. To make her hair buns, I first draw one shape that resembles Chibiusa's hair bun, and then I cut that shape out and trace it 4 times. Then cut those pieces out to make sure everything is the same shape and size. Just to double check, I cross-reference it with her head and then hot glue those pieces together with a needle in the middle so that I can stick them into her head after wrapping the pieces in yarn. And here we have some beautiful, beautiful yarn buns. So, remember in the beginning of the video when I was like completely against sewing clothes for that tiny, tiny hair Doorables doll? Well, turns out that even the Boxy Girls doll was a little bit too small for my taste, and I just do not possess the sewing skills. So, I saw the Dolly Geek use this like foam clay to make clothes once, and he made it look so easy, and his stuff came out so good. I figured I would try it by taking apart the Boxy Girl's original garment to make a pattern, but I cannot. I can't even tell you why I can't, but I just can't yet. Please don't listen to my advice on sewing until I get good at it because it's bad. This isn't even sewing. I can't even sculpt clothes. It's help me. So I struggled with this one shirt, this one clay shirt for so long, and I gave up. Honestly, just trying to record it for you guys. I struggled over and over and over again. I figured if I just kept going, something good would happen or just anything would happen. And I got this result, but it took so long to get here. I admit, it looks pretty cute for a first time, but I could definitely use some practice. Now for the skirt, I have to sew it. all right. We'll just get it over with. Let's just do this. So I'm actually following a picture tutorial off of Google. I just typed in Sailor Moon skirt tutorial and just followed the first thing that popped up. That's the extent of my research on this. But basically you fold the fabric like in 4s, and then you're supposed to like measure the circumference of like the waist and cut like a quarter circle and line it up with the fabric and cut it all out. You're supposed to, after this process, end up with a full circle, but this is so embarrassing. So after I cut my quarter circle, I ended up with a oval square thing. But at this point, I just rolled with it. I figured, hey, it's a doll. It's not supposed to be like functional. Now in the tutorial, you're supposed to cut these notches like in 4s, like evenly. And in these notches, I think it's called a box pleat, where it's like pleated on both sides. I could be wrong. I most likely am. But I was following the tutorial. That's all I can tell you. After doing that, I just did pleats around the entire thing, and I thought it looked pretty good. It took forever, but I liked it. Then I traced the shape of the clay, because Chibiusa, like the shirts dip down in the front. So I just marked it with a Sharpie so that when I'm sewing, I know relatively what shape to follow. And then I follow it using the sewing machine, very slowly. It's so funny, like seeing it on the screen as I'm watching it right now. It looks way more professional than what it is. Like, this is not my experience. This is not me. These aren't my hands. No, they are. I'm kidding. Anyway, so once I'm done sewing the skirt, I carefully line up the seams, like the center point to the top, to make sure everything lines up. Once I verify that everything lines up properly, it's time to adhere the skirt to the doll using hot glue. So starting at the very center of the doll, I'm going to line it up and lift up the foam clay piece and basically just tuck in that very unattractive seam that I have going on underneath the foam clay. I'm going to continue doing this process the entire way around. Using my thumb was not the best decision for me. I'm very sensitive to like heat, so the hot glue touching my thumb every 2 seconds was the worst. The last couple of accessories for her outfit were the 2 red bows that go on her chest and on the back of her skirt. I made them off camera, but believe it or not, these things took me like an hour and a half. Okay? Okay. Now there's a couple of things I need to fix about the doll that I didn't like her boots. Her boots look like they're melting, and her hair, obviously. For her hair, since the rest of it is just so large and in charge, you're probably not going to even see her scalp, to be honest, so I'm going to use flocking to cover the rest of her scalp. For the boots, I'm just going to fill in all those ugly gaps. She should not have gaps in her shoes. Okay. But yeah, I'm just going to use epoxy and run my finger around the shoe, and it kind of just naturally filled in the gaps. Once I ran out of clay, I dipped my finger in water to smooth it out so that when it dries, it doesn't still look crappy, if that makes sense. But all jokes aside, it really did help add that final touch to the boot that I was going for, and it really did help make it look smooth. With the leftover epoxy, I sculpted her little neck charm and then painted it. She's looking so good so far, but it's time for the final touches. Glossing her lips, her eyes, and her ears. And with that, she's done. I'm so happy Chibiusa was the first character I got to make. Even though it was an original character of mine, this process was really fun. And like most of my other projects, very challenging. I'm so happy with how she came out. I hope you love her. Well, if you made it to the end of Chibiusa's video, we want to say a huge thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Huh? Chibi, where are you going? Chibiusa! Chibiusa, come back here now!